Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, today is that final Sunday of Advent, and we'd like to celebrate small towns today. How many of you grew up in a small town? One traffic light in the middle of town? Small town's just a little bit different, if you think about it. As someone's written, you know you live in a small town when a baby born on June 14th receives gifts from local merchants as the first baby born that year. You speak to each dog you pass by name and they wag their tail at you. You can't walk for exercise because every car that passes you wants to stop and give you a ride. You never signal which way you're turning because everybody knows where you're going anyway. You always know it's a small town when you call the wrong number and they give you the right number to call. You can name everybody in your graduating class. How many can do that? You can't help but date a friend's ex-girlfriend. You have to drive an hour just to buy a pair of socks. Get the whiff of manure and it makes you think of home. Someone asks you how you feel, and by God, they actually stop and listen to what you're saying. The one block along Main Street, dead ends at both ends. And the night on a town takes only 11 minutes. And 3rd Street's actually the next town over. You don't give directions by street names, but by reference. Turn by Nelson's house, go down 2 blocks, turn left by Anderson's, 4th house on the left past the football field. Or some of the house burns down, you're in a world of hurt. And the only gas station in town is 2 pumps outside the neighbor's barn. And finally, you know you live in a small town when it says you have now entered and now left on the same side of the sign. Small towns are just a little bit different. You know, White says her family moved to a small town and she decided to check in with the police and fire department just in case there would be an emergency. She knew how to get a hold of them. She dialed the number for the police department. A woman answers the phone, courthouse. And Janelle says, may I talk to the police department? Well, he's not in right now. You know you're in a small town. Well, the ad for the general store in Loretto, Wisconsin lists its location like this: across from the phone booth. How many phone booths are left in the world? Across from the phone booth. They take it down. I wonder if people will find out where they're going. You know, I grew up in a small town named Troy. When I was a kid, it was a small farming community. In fact, there might have been maybe 16,000 people in that town at the time. Not a very big town. Everybody knew everybody and knew everybody's business. In fact, my dad grew up there. My dad's father used to work for B&O Railroad and actually ran a gym in Troy. He was a Golden Glove boxer. But his life was cut short one night refereeing a heavyweight wrestling match. Back when wrestling was wrestling, not this stage stuff. And one of the heavyweights grabbed him behind and crushed all his ribs. And from that he developed TB and died 3 years before I was born. My grandmother worked for a well-known attorney in town. In fact, she outlived 3 attorneys. That tells you something. She was a legal secretary for over 40 years. You didn't have to lock your doors because your neighbors watched your house and you watched theirs. They watched your kids, you watched theirs. And if one of those parents says something to you, by God, you better listen, because your folks are going to know about it by the time you got home. In fact, you didn't dare do anything wrong at school or wrong in the public, because before you hit that front door, your parents knew it and were waiting on you. In a small town like Troy, everybody cared about others. And church was a gathering place on Sundays to talk to friends and visit. And on Friday nights at football games, everybody in town went to Kay's Hamburgers, because they were the first ones to ever have the Frosty before Wendy's was ever heard of. But today, Troy is probably 4 times the size it was when I was a kid. And most people have no idea who lives next door to them on the same block. The place we used to ride our bikes in the summer on nice warm afternoon in the falls, God help you do it today because they're 4-lane highways. And somebody's going to run you down. And you don't see trackers driving up down the main drag like you used to, down through the center of town. In fact, I remember when Van Cleve, which had been high school my dad went to school, and that was a junior high when I was there, every now and The Braun brothers down the street, the cattle would get loose. And the Sheriff's Mounted Patrol would have to come gather them up. And that ruined class for the whole time. They're out there chasing those cows around. Trying to gather them up and get them back down to the Braun Bridge Mills. And Fulton's Farm, that was a place to get strawberries. Oh, big strawberries. Orton's a place to get pizzas and party supplies on the weekends. You know, to watch old black and white TV shows, which my wife hates. Like Andy Griffith of Mayberry, reminds me of those days. Makes me long for those days when life was so much easier and didn't have to move as fast as they do today. Hobart Manufacturing and Hobart Brothers were the biggest employers in town of Troy, and Troy Sunshade Company was the next one, and B.F. Goodrich was also there. Today, much of it's gone. It's no longer the industrial town it used to be. The reason we're celebrating small towns today is, of course, because Jesus was born in a small town. Each year we sing Philip Brooks' beautiful hymn, "O Little Town of Bethlehem." You all know it. O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. Above thy deep and dreamless sleep, the silent stars go by. Yet in thy dark street shine the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. Brooks wrote those words just a mere 1868, it's about 150 years ago this year. Following the pilgrimage he had to the Holy Land. He was inspired by the view of Bethlehem to the surrounding hills of Palestine, especially at night. His church organist, Lois Redner, wrote the melody for that hymn. And the hymn catches our imagination, almost brings Bethlehem alive to our mind's eye of what it had to look like back then. Jesus was born in a small town to fulfill a prophecy found in Micah 5, verses 2 through 5. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in his majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth, and he will be their peace. In Hebrews, the town is Bethlehem, which means house of bread. For believers, it's significant that the house of bread is where he who is the bread of life is born. And Bethlehem today is a city of approximately 50,000 people. But back when Jesus was born, it was just a little village, estimated between 300 and 1,000 people at most. In fact, it was referred to as a poor, sorry village, scarcely worth an apostrophe. Bethlehem's only 5 miles south of Jerusalem, only a 2.5-hour walk. Joseph and Mary, residents of Nazareth, went to Bethlehem for the census ordered by Caesar Augustus. That journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem is a more arduous journey than from Jerusalem, because it's some 80 miles. The message of Christmas would be just as powerful if Christ had been born in a great metropolitan area. But somehow this tiny village seems to capture the essence of the Christ event. Bethlehem reminds us that God can use ordinary people in ordinary places in an extraordinary way. Each year, we have to fight to maintain the simple nature of Christmas in a world full of glittery materialism. You may remember the story of the television reporter who was interviewing people in the streets of Tokyo at Christmas time. Just like in America, Christmas shopping is a big commercial enterprise in Japan, even though the Christians are a tiny minority in that land. The interview stopped one young Japanese woman on the sidewalk and asked her, "What's the meaning of Christmas to you?" And laughing, the young woman replied, "I don't know. Is that when Jesus died?" Well, maybe it is. We have to maintain a constant vigil to ensure that the birth of the Messiah doesn't degenerate into the worship of mammon. or material possessions. You know, maybe your family will gather around the television this Christmas to watch one more time that classic 1946 American Christmas fantasy drama, a motion picture known as It's a Wonderful Life. How many of you ever watched a movie or enjoy that movie? When I was a kid, I couldn't understand that for love nor money. But you know, now I'm older, got it down pat. I know what they're talking about. It's based off a short story and a booklet, The Greatest Gift, by Philip Van Doren Stern from 1939. And actor Jimmy Stewart, who starred in the film, offered this reflection on his meaning. He says, the character I played was George Bailey, an ordinary kind of fellow who thinks he's never accomplished anything in life. He dreams of becoming a famous architect, of traveling the world and living adventurously, have not yet been fulfilled. Instead, he feels trapped in a humdrum job in a small town. And when he's faced with a crisis in which he feels he has failed everyone, he breaks under the strain and flees to the bridge. And that's when the guardian angel, Clarence, comes down on Christmas Eve to show him what his community would be like without him. The angel takes him back through his life to show how our ordinary, everyday efforts are really big achievements. Clarence reveals how George Bailey's loyalty to his job at the Building and Loan Office has saved families and homes. How his little kindnesses have changed the lives of others. And how the ripples of his life will spread through the world, helping make it a better place. Today, after some 50 years, I've heard the film called an American cultural phenomenon. Well, maybe so. But it seems to me that there is nothing phenomenal about the movie itself. It's simply about an ordinary man who discovers that living each ordinary day honorably, with faith in God and a selfless concern for others, can make for a truly wonderful life. You know, I mentioned at a funeral lately how the length of a man's shadow can exemplify those he touches directly and indirectly throughout his life. And that's so true. That's what George Bailey found out. Because you know, there's no superstars in the Christmas story. Even a master came into the world under the most inauspicious of circumstances. A stable, a manger, shepherds in a field, a humble couple with no place to lay their heads. Christian comedian Robert G. Lee put it in a humorous, memorable way. He said, Christianity is filled with paradoxes. The Israelites expected the Messiah to be a great warrior and king. They got a carpenter. You generally don't expect the guy who's going to do your kitchen cabinets to save the world. Well, no, you don't. But that's the point. Bethlehem reminds us that God can use ordinary people in ordinary places in extraordinary ways. In fact, Bethlehem also reminds us that we're a part of a sacred history. Jesus was born in Bethlehem to fulfill an Old Testament prophecy. This is an important situation. The coming of Christ was part of God's covenant with the people of Israel, and subsequent with all the people everywhere. Bethlehem was no accidental birthplace. Bethlehem was where Jacob's beloved wife Rachel was buried, and where Israel's greatest king David was born. Samuel anointed David the king in Bethlehem. David was a descendant of Ruth and Boaz, who were married in Bethlehem. The Messiah was to be part of the house and lineage of David. We are a part of a sacred history that extends all the way back to Abraham and Sarah. You know, we often say that Christmas is a tradition, and it is. Tradition is from the Latin word traditio, which means action of handing over. How many of you have traditions you follow at Christmas at home? You put a tree up a certain time, you fix certain foods for dinner at Christmas. You know, you open the gifts at a certain time. Maybe you're allowed to have one gift on Christmas Eve before church. We're not letting you see them until they come out Christmas Day after church. We all have our traditions. Over the centuries, Christians have been handing over from one generation to the next the songs, the stories, the rituals that have come to mean Christmas to us. That's a vital part of our lives. We treasure that we have, and that which we were, and it's been handed down to us. In mid-December of this year, before her first child was born, a woman named Kathy was given a baby shower by her family. After opening what she thought were all the presents, she found one more additional box. It wasn't wrapped in baby shower paper, but in Christmas paper. And it bore a card that read, "To my daughter." "This is one from my mom," Kathy announced to those that were present as she opened the gift. Inside the box was a quilt. She tried to smile, but she held it up for everybody to see. But she secretly felt that and hoped that Mom couldn't see her face. Her mother would know that her smile wasn't genuine, because the quilt wasn't very pretty. It wasn't a baby quilt. It wasn't made of pink or blue and yellow materials. It didn't have bunnies or bears on it. It was just a patchwork quilt sewn in materials that were all different colors and patterns. And holding up the quilt, Kathy noticed a note tucked in the box. Not realizing the note was intended to be private, she set the quilt aside, she picked up that note, she began reading it. Then she discovered that her mother had made the quilt for her. The unmatched materials were remnants of her life her mother had saved over all the years. She had cut swatches of material from items dating back to her first Christmas dress. Some of the swatches were as current as a shirt she wore to the doctor the day she found out she was pregnant. Her mother had accumulated patches of her life over all these years to make this quilt. By the time Kathy finished reading her mother's letter, telling her of the patch of her mother's old robe, remembered her as well. It was the fleece that she used to insist her mother wear so she could lay her head on it when her mother rocked her. And the patch of her dad's flannel shirt she used to put on after her bath. Each and every patch and its meaning were there in that note. And there wasn't a dry eye in her room when she finished reading that note. At that point, husband Kathy picked up that quilt and held it against herself, and she cried. To think just seconds before, she had thought that quilt ugly, but now it was the most beautiful quilt she ever had. It was the most beautiful quilt she'd ever seen made. This quilt made of her life with her mother's love. She had sewn her love into every single stitch of that quilt. Christmas is like that. We have traditions from many lands and many cultures, all stitched together to make a holiday like no other. It's a tradition that actually goes back many centuries before the birth of the babe in the manger. All the way back to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. All the way back to Moses and to Joshua and David. All the way back to Isaiah and Jeremiah and Micah. Actually goes back further than that. It goes all the way back to the time that God took the dust of the earth and created man and woman and breathed in them the breath of life. It's a tradition of divine purpose and love. Bethlehem reminds us that God can use ordinary people and ordinary circumstances and places in extraordinary ways. Excuse me. Bethlehem also reminds us that we are a part of a sacred history. And one final thing, which is most important of all. Bethlehem reminds us that God is with us. Listen again to Micah's words. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth, and he will be their peace. I love those words. He will be their peace. Christ doesn't simply bring us peace. He is our peace. As you saw up there, he is our peace. Where Christ is, there is peace. You know, perhaps your life is filled with conflict, unhappiness, emotional pain this Christmas season. That's true of many people. All the happiness of this season of the year can mask the desperate hurt that many people really feel. In fact, the appropriate prayer for this season of the year is not, bring me peace, bring me happiness, or bring me hope. The appropriate prayer is, Christ Jesus, give me yourself. Come into my heart, Jesus. Be born in me anew. For where Christ is, there is peace. There is happiness. There is joy. There is love. Sue Monk Kidd, in her book From When the Angel Waits, writes about her visit to a monastery around Christmas time one year. She passed a monk walking around the courtyard outside the church, and she said, Merry Christmas. And the monk replied, May Christ be born in you. At the time, this kid thought that this was a very peculiar greeting, but she never forgot it. And with time, she came to realize the power of that simple greeting. May Christ be born in you. When Christ dwells within, there is peace. In fact, John Paul II, in his Angelus message of December the 19th, 1999, explains that Christmas is not simply the remembrance of an event that took place 2,000 years ago. According to the gospel, the power of God took on the frailty of a baby. It's really about a living reality that is repeated every year in the heart of believers. The mystery of the Holy Night, which historically happens 2,000 years ago, must be lived as a spiritual event in the today of our liturgy. And the Pope clarified, the Word who found a dwelling in Mary's womb came to knock on the heart of every person. Bethlehem reminds us that God is with us in the person of Jesus Christ. Small towns are a little bit different. Christ was born in a small town. O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. Bethlehem reminds us that God can use ordinary people in ordinary places in extraordinary ways. Bethlehem reminds us that we are part of a sacred history. That's why the traditions of Christmas are so important to us. And most importantly of all, Bethlehem reminds us that God is with us in the person of Jesus Christ. And here's what Christ wants: to be born anew in our hearts in this Advent Christmas season. May he be born in your heart today.